Today we're going to look at a Shakespearean sonnet. The one we've chosen to read is entitled, "That Time of Year Thou Mayest in Me Behold." I'll go ahead and read it. That time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none, or few, do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs where late the sweet birds sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day, as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self that seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as on the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. Jim, how does form work in a sonnet? We all often think of sonnets as a strict literary form.
Sonnets are very definitely a strict literary form. In this case, and in all cases, sonnets are 14-line poems written in iambic pentameter with one of a couple different rhyme schemes. But even more particular, in a sonnet like this, which is also called the English or Shakespearean sonnet sometimes, it's broken down into other smaller parts. In this case, we've got the first sentence is actually 4 lines. The second sentence is 4 lines. The third sentence is 4 lines. You see the pattern developing here.
So grammar and form are in harmony in the sonnet.
Absolutely. Grammar, form, and the ideas in this poem as well. If you look at each one of these groups of 4 lines, they give us one image. There's one basic image that's presented, and yet all 3 work together to give sort of different views of one issue.
And when we talk about 4 lines in poetry, we can refer to it as a quatrain. Like cuatro in Spanish, it means 4. So there are 3 groups of 4 lines, and then the couplet at the end totaling 14 lines.
Heroic couplet, I think is what they call it, because it's written, again, in iambic pentameter, that 10-meter line that you have running throughout this whole poem.
Looking at the first image then in the first quatrain, that time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves or none or few do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold. What is the image there that dominates those lines?
That's a hard one for anybody on the Central Coast here, because we don't have the 4 seasons that they had in England and much of the rest of the world. But basically saying that time of the year that you can see in me is the time of year that most people think of as fall.
And not only fall, but more exactly late fall.
Yeah.
Because the yellow leaves or none, so the trees have turned yellow, but actually the time the sonnet's talking about in this first quatrain is right at the tail end, isn't it? Or none or few do hang. That's a beautiful set of details, isn't it? Just a few leaves hanging on. So we're almost to winter, but not quite. It's like a period of transition.
So what does that mean? You wake up in the morning and you say, I'm feeling kind of like fall today.
And there's a thou, or the poem is being spoken to someone, right? That's
right.
You may observe in me, that thou may in me behold. So the time of year is not just the time of year as in a nature poem, it's also a metaphor for the time of life of the speaker of the poem.
Which is a typical metaphor that you see in a lot of poetry, right? I am in the fall of my life, the late fall of my life. I'm coming towards the end, and we see that things have changed. And that idea is picked up in the second quatrain. In me thou seest the twilight of such day, as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self that seals up all in rest.
It seems here the language gets very difficult, particularly towards the end of that quatrain, doesn't it? Is he talking about here, in me you see the twilight of such day? What exactly is twilight? It's a very specific reference to a specific time, isn't it?
It's that point of time when what? The sun has gone down, but the light is still...
The sun has disappeared, but the vault of the sky is still paler than the darkness.
That's right. That's right. There's
very
still
close to darkness.
There's still a glow. There's still this beautiful energy. In fact, a lot of people think it's the most beautiful time of the day, and photographers strive to take photos of that time of the day. And yet you're right, darkness is right along the edge. It's right almost there.
And so this is kind of analogous to the very end of the time of year, the very end of a day. So we've moved from a season to a day in these images.
Where does he go in the third quatrain?
In me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire. I'm thinking of going into a darkened room and seeing a fire which has been burning, which now only has some coals in it, and there's just a slight glow. So the fire has consumed itself, as it says here. You know, the wood is all burned, and all you have are the glowing coals beneath a slight veneer, a slender veneer of ashes.
It's also the best time to cook, though, right? That's when the fire is at its best.
As an old wine gets better, is that the idea? But one of the things that's interesting, we have three separate images here that aren't necessarily closely related. The late autumn, twilight at the end of a day, and then the tail end of a fire, you know, and there's no flame but just some glowing coals. How do those three work together, or are they just separate images that the poet's using to be repetitive, or are they connected thematically in some way?
I think they are connected thematically, and they're moving from just an external view of the self to something with a little bit more depth. Those final lines of the third quatrain, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie as the deathbed whereupon it must expire. There's something more there. There's something.
It's more of an internal sort of image.
Yeah.
The glowing fire, a glowing passion within, maybe. And I was thinking, you have a large expanse of time, the year, and
That's
then
right.
the next
And it narrows
image
down.
is a 24-hour day. So you move from 356 days down to 1 day, and then down to a fire, which is just a moment in a day. And so the time is like an upside down, like a V, and it comes down to a point where time is getting shorter. The images represent a shortening of time in each case. And I wonder if that adds to that intensity you were talking about.
I think so. I think it really does.
You have a whole year to wait for autumn, but then you only have a few hours with a fire. And so that's the shortest and most intense image, as you were pointing out. Well, we're almost to the couplet, but I don't think we should talk about it. I think we should see how our students connect the couplet to these three rather complex and interesting and beautiful images that the poem contains.
Yes. And think about how the couplet operates not only in this poem, but in the other Shakespearean sonnets that we may be reading this semester, and see if it does similar things.
Good luck. We're looking forward to your discussion.